Thanks for coming along today. Pleasure to be here and to speak about Backpack, our design system at Skyscanner, and more importantly about our journey in creating it. So I'm James, I'm the one at the back, in case you can't tell. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to, at Mr. James Ferguson. I'm a designer. I work at Skyscanner in Edinburgh. You might be wondering who are Skyscanner. We like to think of ourselves as the world's travel search engine. You may know us for flights and flight comparison, but we also have other products as well, including hotels and car rental. And we're starting to roll out trains as well with that. We were founded in 2003 in Edinburgh, and we're nearly 1,000 employees worldwide across kind of 11 different offices. We've got 60 million monthly active users and over 70 million app downloads. So the scale of which we're working at is pretty big. And as a design team, our mission is everything we do for you, the traveler. Your trust and happiness is sacred to us. We believe in eliminating the pain of travel by giving you insanely great experiences. It's a wonderful world out there, and you can have access to all of it with Skyscanner. But as I said, I'm here to talk to you about Backpack and our journey in creating a design system. But before I get into the details of how we approached it and where we're at to date, I thought it would be useful to try and kind of set the scene a little bit, just so you've got a bit of context to where we've been as an organization, and why a design system was something that was needed. So if we rewind a few years ago, back to 2014, our product was largely web-based. It was all contained within one giant monolithic code base. Designs were funneled through pretty much one centralized design team. They were all co-located around the same bank of desks. Fast forward 1 year, we squadified. And we use this term quite a lot at Skyscanner, and I thought it would be good just to dip into a little bit about what we mean by that. So prior to 2015, this is pretty much how our org used to look, give or take. Product teams, design teams, engineering teams, growth teams. And essentially, things were handed over the wall between these different teams. Product would ask design, design would ask engineering, and then growth would have to kind of market it. Engineering started to really become a bit of a bottleneck here. Having that one repository, which all teams had to go through, was proving to be a bit of a problem. So that's when we kind of started introducing the squad and tribe model that Spotify have made popular over the last few years. The squad kind of model means that we've got small cross-functional teams made up of around 10 people. Each squad has a clear mission, and everyone's empowered to be fully autonomous within that squad. We have many squads. They look slightly differently depending on the needs of that squad. Some may have more engineering resource, some may have more design resource or product or growth. But this is generally kind of what they look like, and we've got many of these squads across the business. We group them together in a group that we call tribes. And we've got many tribes that sit across the business as well. So at this point, it really accelerated our ability to ship at scale. Prior to this, we were releasing every 6 weeks. Releasing was a huge event for Skyscanner. We named every single release with funny names, and it was a big thing. Now, we're kind of releasing multiple times a day at our own heartbeat. The bad. This meant that we essentially started to duplicate a lot of our efforts, and sharing between teams became really difficult. Give you some examples here. So this is the main Skyscanner website. You'll see in the middle some form fields. You've essentially got a depart, a return, a couple of dates, and some passenger information, and a big button to search for flights. This is on our consumer product. If we look here, you'll see pretty much the same thing again, but in our corporate travel product. and then again in our B2B product. All of these were designed completely separately, all using different technologies. So that meant that when we added features to, say, our consumer site, we added multi-city. It meant that the product managers would often kind of pipe up and say, hey, could we get that feature on our B2B site? Well, no. No, it's not as kind of easy as moving one thing to there. One, it looks different, it behaves different, and it's written completely differently. And that was the big things. The other kind of thing was the amount of kind of inconsistency amongst our products and platforms. If we look here, you'll see some banner alerts, one of our favorite components at Skyscanner. I say that because Matteo, who's sitting in the audience today, has had a lot of the pain regarding banner alerts in the past. But you'll see here, these are pretty much the same component. They all look different. They all behave differently. Even things like language is different. And then like the really small things like close buttons. This is kind of a particular favorite of mine, pretty much because I'm responsible for about 5 of these close buttons. And I think sometimes finding the source of truth is harder than taking two lines and rotating them 45 degrees to make a new close button. The other thing that we really struggled with at this point in time was making site-wide changes. It was really difficult. If we take these 3 buttons here, these used to be the style of our call to action buttons across our flights, hotels, and car rental search controls that sit on the home pages. They're pretty much the same button until you start to look a bit deeper. Some of the gradients are different, some of the font weights are different, some of the font sizes are different, some have got different border radiuses. They're all just a bit different from each other, and there's no reason for them to be different, other than a designer at some point has said, hey, let's make it this way. Or an engineering team have said, we don't have time for that, let's just do it quickly and we'll get this out. So trying to align teams on this was particularly difficult. Trying to get one source of truth for everything was really tough. The other part is that with kind of no standards, there was a bit of a kind of free-for-all in the business. We'd love to give every team in the business access to design resource. But unfortunately, we are constrained like every other business in the world, and there's some teams that do have to go without. But with no reference material, no documentation, those teams still need to get their job done, but have nothing to kind of help them with that. And that's where we kind of move on to the ugly. In this example that we pull up here, there's many things probably wrong with this from a design perspective, but the sheer amount of different styles of buttons, never mind the sausage-shaped buttons that you see there as well. Again, this was just a result of teams needing to get their job done that didn't have that go-to information. So we're kind of banging our heads against the wall here a little bit. At that point, I was based within a product team, and my colleague, who's now the design systems tech lead, we're both really frustrated with this. So we had to do something. So I'll move on now to kind of how we got started. We started really small. We started to unify our color palette. Sounds quite easy, doesn't it? Actually, when we dug into it, we realized that we had this. We had multiple teams with different color palettes, very similar shades in some cases, and then the purple that's there, which is, I still don't know where that purple came from. This is probably a result of teams copy and pasting hex values, maybe typing them in wrong, maybe sampling from the days of Photoshop, or people just saying, well, actually, I don't quite like that color, I'll just make another one, because why not? So we took that, and we tried to align all the different teams in the business, and we got to this. So a slightly more modern palette, a couple of primary colors, some secondary colors, and then some neutrals. We've got a team of like over 40 designers. We couldn't have 40 designers trying to pick our color palette. And that was one of the biggest things from day one, is making sure that people feel that they're represented and that we have the right people in the room to help make these decisions. So at this point, it's probably worth calling out that if we did nothing else, we still was still a huge achievement. This was a side project. It was something we were doing at our own time. We had managed to get the design team from that massive color palette down to something that made a bit more sense. It was great, really good. But we had no way of sharing this with the engineering teams, other than saying, here's some new hex codes, copy paste from here as opposed to wherever you were copy pasting them from before. So we published an NPM package of SAS variables and kind of said to teams, hey, this is the new source of truth, start using it from here. Bit of a hard sell though. Turns out trying to get teams to use something new that is kind of slightly unproven at this point alongside their daily schedules is really tough, really hard. But there's beer, and beer pays. We basically called on from favors from anyone that we were friends with in the business. And obviously our team was naturally the first adopter of this. So we managed to convince a few people that they should give it a go and try this new way of working. And it started to gain traction. I think one of the things that's really started to prove its worth at this point was that, yeah, the design team had a kind of subset that were working on this new color palette, and they were all agreed. As a designer and as part of that team, we always want to change things. We obviously we're never going to be happy with just that color palette. We were going to tweak it. We had tested it in certain situations, but we hadn't tested it everywhere. So that meant we had to shift some grays ever so slightly, maybe tweak the kind of the hue of the blue, and that meant that there was going to be updates down the line. So when we did that, it meant that teams could opt in to the new package that was available, and they would get that stuff essentially for free. So it was really starting to kind of prove its worth at this point. So at this point, it was really time to starting to get buy-in that actually, a design system would really help us at Skyscanner. We presented to anybody that would listen, essentially, from C-level to VP, directors, to anyone on the ground, anyone that would listen. If they wouldn't listen, we would try and make them listen. We showed them our proof of concept. We gave examples of what other companies have been doing in the world and how this has really accelerated their workflows. And generally, everyone really nodded along. Yeah, this sounds like a good thing. Great. For us, it was always about an equal partnership between design and engineering. I think you'll find that these projects or initiatives, or however you want to look at it. I say a project, but that sounds like it's going to be done. I don't think it will ever be done. But I think these initiatives have often can go one of two ways. Down the design route, which essentially will probably result in a PDF that's stored on Dropbox that no one looks at. Or we'll end up with an engineering option that no designer wants to touch because they don't know how to use it and it's quite techy and, well, yeah, that's their thing, it's not mine. So for us, it was really about these two things coming together. So as I said, everybody agreed that this was a good thing, quite good, but nothing really happened. There was no real action on the back of that. We hadn't got explicit permission to go away and set up a team. We hadn't really got much further forward than where we were, other than we'd raised awareness of the problem, which was good. But really, it started to get interesting when we started to look at the financial side of things. Talking to the C-level folks, money talks. So take this button, for example. You'll probably find that we have implemented this. We've designed it and we've implemented it, 20 times at Skyscanner in the past. The cost of that, the cost of design and engineering salaries to work on a button, how many more times do we want to spend on that was the conversation we were having. And at that point, that's when people really started to listen. Not just because how much have we spent today, but how much are we going to spend tomorrow? As a company, going back to our vision there of for travelers, by travelers, we are here to solve travel problems, not really to design and implement a new button every week. So for us, backpacking our design system was really a way to try and accelerate teams to get their stuff to market as quickly as possible. So great news. Full-time team was formed. We were given 6 months to try and further prove that this project, again, I use the word project loosely, was a good thing. So myself and Matt, our tech lead, kind of spent 6 months working through everything. We started with a mission. This is still true today. This is our mission. We're here to enable teams, whether they're designers or engineering teams, to create coherent, beautiful, and usable products quickly and without pain. So our kind of approach was that we had to kind of start at the beginning. We had to kind of lay the foundations a little bit here. And for us at Skyscanner, up until this point, in terms of tech choices, it was a complete free-for-all. With the squad model, it brought that full autonomy that if you wanted to use a new JavaScript framework, then on you go. It did mean that sharing stuff was particularly difficult. So basically, there was this kind of small engineering team put together to try and evaluate these different frameworks that were out there, ones that we had in the business, ones that were coming out. And it really came down to React or Angular. And in some respects, it doesn't really matter which one we chose. The fact that we were making a decision to standardize was the big thing. We did end up going down the React route, mostly because it gave us the long-term flexibility, given it's only the view layer, and we could switch that out in the future. But yeah, for us, it was that kind of first point of saying that we're going to start standardizing on tools. We also kind of learned from the giants. So there's a great conference called Clarity Conference, based mostly in San Francisco. It's been going for a couple of years. I think this year it's moving to New York. It's all about design systems. We definitely recommend checking it out. So we kind of heard from various teams there in Silicon Valley talking about how they had or were embarking on putting together a design system. And that really helped inform our kind of choices and the way that we were going. The other thing we did at this point as well, considering how far San Francisco is away from Edinburgh, we used that as an opportunity to try and meet with as many different tech companies as we could. And one piece of advice I'd give to anyone is that if you ask enough people to meet with them, eventually someone will say yes. It's amazing how far 30 days of LinkedIn Premium can get you. So it's definitely worth doing. I think we reached out to probably about 200 folk, and eventually we got 5 meetings. But we met with Dropbox, we met with Facebook, we met with Google, amongst others. So it was a real kind of worthwhile thing to do. And we've since followed up with those people as well. So where do we start? We started with atomic design principles. Hopefully, if you're here, you're interested in design systems. You may have heard of atomic design principles. It's something a chap called Brad Frost coined a few years ago. And it essentially talks about taking complex systems and breaking them down into their component parts, and then further breaking them down until you get to the point that you can't break it down any further. You're essentially creating Lego, lots of little Lego bricks that can be assembled together to make something new. For us, when we first started working on this, we thought, great, this is out there. Let's try and name everything, change it, make it Skyscanner, make it ours, because we like to change things. And actually, it doesn't really matter what you call it. I think that was one of the biggest learnings. I remember we had many different conversations around, was this button an atom, or is that a molecule, or is it whatever? It really doesn't matter. They're all components at the end of the day. But for transparency, I'll share what we've got with you just now. So we've got these 5 different elements. Tokens, things like color, like spacing, font sizes, line heights, that type of thing. For us, that's the smallest piece in our design system. Generally, you can't see them on your own. You need to apply them to something. So if you take a color, you can't really see a color unless you apply it to a div or a button or whatever else. Then the smallest kind of usable element, atom level if you like, things like buttons, like links, like icons, that type of thing. And then up from there, starting to group those little atoms together gives you a molecule. At this point, not really strayed too much away from Brad Frost's original kind of idea of this. But yeah, molecules could be bigger things, such as date pickers or an auto-suggest component or something like that. And then you start to get bigger and bigger. So really for us in Backpack, this is really what we look after. This is what's owned by us. We look after the small pieces, and we still rely on teams to work on the bigger pieces. So when it comes back to those examples I showed at the start around the different search controls and how they were different across there, in theory, Backpack wouldn't standardize those search controls. But all the pieces that make them up, we would. And because we're all about standardization and trying to help the sharing piece, that has that knock-on effect so that those things could be easily shared in the future. But if there's nothing else you take away, it's about components being made of components essentially. So we'd done color. We had this new strategy in place. We next kind of wanted to look at typography and spacing. For us, and still to this day, I would say that if you can unify color, typography, and spacing, it will make a huge difference to your experience. And that's kind of where we started. One of the things that often crops up within the design team is a custom web font. And you could do a whole talk purely on that. So I'm not here to talk about that. But our approach was to implement a native font stack. So this is becoming more and more popular. I think it might have been GitHub that originally started. I can't quite remember. Maybe Medium. But essentially, look into the device that you're using to see if there's a native font that you can use other than Arial, because that was the default, and no designer ever wants Arial. So essentially, we're looking, do you have San Francisco? Are you using an Apple device? Great, let's use that. Are you using Roboto? Are you using an Android device? If not, make your way down the list, and eventually, if nothing else, you'll get Arial or another default sans serif font. For us, it was great. We were getting good typography for free. These companies, such as Apple and Google, have spent a ton of money on optimizing these fonts, especially for small screens. And we were getting all that value for free, if you like. We did have Segoe from Microsoft in there as well, but we took it out further quite quickly, to be fair, because of its where it sat on its baseline. It was particularly low compared to the rest, so things generally just looked a bit off. And sorry for any Microsoft folk in the room, but if you're using a Windows machine, then you probably deserve Arial anyway. So our core principles that we baked in, accessibility. Up until this point, and also to an extent today, our support for accessibility on the Skyscanner web product isn't and wasn't great, really. Fire up a screen reader. There was a point in time where it read the alphabet out to you before it even got to trying to tell you what was in the header. Really not good, not cool. So Backpack really want to help with that. So everything that we do, we build support for accessibility in, whether that's screen readers, whether that's keyboard navigation, whether it's any other type of assistive technology, we build that in. Obviously, when we've got a component that is accessible, it can still be put together in an accessible way. So there's still a lot of work we need to do there with teams, but it's something that we said, look, we're going to do this. We're going to do it from the start. Theming as well is really important to us. So for two reasons, really. First one being that Skyscanner has a two-sided marketplace. So we have our travelers that are very important to us, but we also have our partners, which are very important to us as well. So airlines, hotel chains, other folk. And in our experience, when you get to our shopping and our checkout, our idea is to make that as branded as possible so that people know who they're booking with. The other point that theming really came in is if we look for a 2018 or a 2019 theme, if we wanted to do a bit of a redesign, how would we do that? So that was something that was really important to us, and we've built that in all of our components as well. The other thing is right to left. Our app and our website is available in over 30 languages, including some Arabic ones on the app as well. If we want to bring Arabic to the website, then we need to start building that into everything we do. Right to left is no small thing to try and retrofit back into a product. But if you do it from the start, it's much, much easier. So next I'll talk a little bit about supporting designers. Our design tool of choice is Sketch. Like on the engineering side, we had to standardize on a tool. Luckily, it was much easier. The majority of designers were using Sketch. It was great. There was a couple of die-hard Illustrator fans and an Axure fan and whatnot, but generally, people were using Sketch, so it made sense to do that. So all good there, really. For us, we've really kind of started to use some of the shared library aspect of Sketch. It's been out for quite a while now. But there is a new competitor on the market, which is particularly interesting as well, which is InVision's DSM. They're really accelerating their design system manager tool. And whilst I think it's still in beta, it's showing some real promise and maybe something that we look to moving to in the future. In terms of supporting engineers, all of these design tokens that I talked about, they're all defined in JSON. We use a tool from Salesforce called Theo. Essentially allows us to transform these JSON values into any other type of variable that we need, such as Sass variables, JavaScript variables, whatever. We have Sass mixins and variables available as well, React components for web, and React Native components for app as well. It's really quite easy to use any of our components. It's 3 simple steps, essentially. An npm install, importing it into your project, and then just using it, really. And at no point does anybody need to worry about any of the extra CSS or anything like that, because it's all encapsulated in that one component. So let's talk a little bit about adoption. Backpack has been going now for close to 2 years. We've made some real impact in the business. Got a graph here. You'll see that pink/red line is our SaaS adoption. You'll see that quickly took off as a way of adopting Backpack components and things. For us, that was a key part of that transition and that standardization piece, because most people were actually using Sass already or could be convinced that would be their preprocessor of choice. React took a little bit longer to get going. As said, teams had everything in the business, from Backbone, jQuery, Lodash, whatever. They had loads of different stuff going on. It did take a bit of time, but you can see that that's now pretty much our default for everything. And then React Native. We started that probably back in July last year. This graph looks like we've not really done anything. We've got over 20 components for React Native now. They're all being used within the app. What this doesn't show is that usage exactly, because essentially, as soon as you import one of these components into the app, we've got 2 code bases for app, iOS and Android, so it's already at 100%. So we do need to look at a different way of visualizing the adoption for React Native. It's not the only thing that has increased as well. Our team has increased. This is our team today. So you got me and Matt there, the original 2. And then we've got the rest that have come in as well along the way. It's great to have been able to have built that team and to have different expertise in there, from design to engineering, and the different kind of aspects of mobile as well. Challenges. I could stand here and talk for another couple of hours about design challenges or engineering challenges. Yes, there's been challenges on that, but for us, the biggest challenge is people. It often gets kind of overlooked that actually to make this shift is a big culture shift in a business, especially when you have a high level of autonomy. We spend an awful lot of our time making sure that we're collaborating, enabling, and helping folk with the existing tools and components that we have. For us, we'd rather down tools as a team and help someone that's got a problem with something we've built, rather than make something new. So for us, That level of customer service is something that we have always been kind of really high on our agenda from day one. We're an enablement team at the end of the day. And if no one's using our stuff, that's a problem. So I'll finish off just with a few kind of things that we found useful along the way. Talked about sketch libraries. Yep, absolutely. They're great for us. Auto Layout is a plugin for Sketch. If you haven't tried it, I would definitely check it out. It essentially allows you to do pretty accurate pinning of elements within your symbols. So meaning when you resize stuff, you start to get responsive behavior to a degree, and it's much better than the Sketch equivalent that's built into Sketch. React Storybook, if you haven't checked it out, it's basically an interactive development and testing environment. We have had much success for that, using it for both React and React Native. Lerna is a kind of a tool for managing JavaScript projects that have multiple packages. Each of our components is its own package. And sometimes there are dependencies between those packages, so making sure that everything's in line and that version bumps happening and all the rest of it, Lerna has really helped with that. I mentioned Theo earlier, Theo from Salesforce, essentially transforming JSON into different variable types. I don't think I mentioned, but we've also used that to generate native packages as well. So CocoaPods and Gradle packages for iOS and Android as well to be used directly in our app that might not be used in React Native. And then Design System Slack. There's obviously many different Slack accounts out there. No surprise that there's a Design Systems one. It's a very active community. I would encourage you to join. There's many different city-specific ones, as well as different topics. Yeah, if you Google Design System Slack, you'll find that. It was originally set up by Gina, one of the organizer from Clarity conference that I talked about. So that's it from me. If you do want to check out our stuff, if you go to backpack.github.io, you'll be able to see all of our things there. It is completely open source, so feel free to use and build upon it if need be. And you can check out the Skyscanner website as well if you're interested. So that's it from me. If there's any questions, happy to take them. There's one at the back.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I have a question because you guys deal with a lot of different languages as well, and I see you have you guys look at the native fonts of a device first. How do you deal with design and different languages, different lengths, widths, and these kind of things? Because you're never going to be sure what the final result will look like in that language, in that font.
Yep, totally. No, localization for us and translation and everything that goes with that is key, really. As a designer that previously had only worked in English, moving to a company that had multiple languages and then now 30 plus, it can be challenging. Strings vary hugely between, say, English and German or Dutch or whatever else. Through to languages like Chinese, where they're sometimes much shorter as well. So we have various kind of tools internally to help kind of test out things like longer strings and stuff like that. So that's particularly useful. But yeah, it's a lot of kind of trial and error. It's not doing silly things like kind of fixing heights of things, letting things flow. All the kind of good stuff that web and app should probably do. So yeah. That's kind of how we handle that.
All right. Thank you.
Cool. We've actually built a tool as well in using Google Translate as a way of just quickly testing to see strings as well, and integrated that into. We've got plans to integrate that into Sketch as well, so designers can click on something and just get a rough idea of what it is. Obviously, We don't use Google Translate to translate our product, but it gives you that kind of quick snapshot in time. So that's something that could be useful as well. We've not open sourced that yet, and maybe something we do in the future as well. Cool. Hey.
Yeah, I had a question about the process. How do you keep the time to market really high? I can imagine, for example, you have a team who wants to use a component, but it doesn't really fit their needs. It needs to be changed. Do they change it themselves, or is it this team you showed that does the changes? How do you make sure it's not a bottleneck?
Totally. So I think one of the things that I called out there is that the tokens, atoms, molecules are owned by us. We say that loosely. The design system belongs to the design team and to the engineering team. It needs someone to maintain it, so that's us. And we drive stuff and we put stuff in, and we're probably the majority of contributions go in from us. But Skyscanner has a big thing about internal open source. So if you want to contribute to any project in the business, you can, and we have processes and bits and pieces in to help with that. So we regularly receive contributions from other designers or engineers, depending on what it is. I think one of the things that we want to always try and make sure is that we start off with a conversation. We don't want anyone to go away and take something and change it all or create something new when actually maybe someone else is already working on it, or maybe we're working on it. So we always start that with an open conversation. Sometimes there might not even be any changes needed. It might just be, okay, the classic, you're holding it wrong. It might be that you just need to put it in a different situation or use a different component or something like that. So it's a very fluid thing. And I guess that comes back to our kind of high level of customer service that we try and give to teams using stuff as well, is that we're always there. We're always about if you want to help with anything. So it's a two-way thing. There's one at the back.
Hi, James.
Hey.
My name is Francesca Vonk. I'm a freelance UX designer, and I was wondering if your design team also codes, or is that a separate specialization?
Should designers code?
Exactly.
The big question.
Exactly.
Our design team is mixed. Some do, some don't. It's not something that we look for in particular when we're hiring. I personally am quite happy to get stuck into bits and pieces. We've got other designers that are, could probably in a separate life be a front-end developer. I think it just depends, really. It's certainly something that we found really helps because they understand the constraints, they understand what's going on, and often conversations can be had much easier. But it's not something that is uniform across the team, and it's not something that we actually kind of go out looking for either.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Anyone else? All good? Cool. Well, thanks very much for coming along. I'll be about later if you want to chat. See you later.